I'm Clarissa Steele, and I'm an assistant professor of management here at K-State. I primarily teach organizational behavior, which is a class about applying psychological concepts in the workplace, as well as human resource management classes. I really have two goals in my teaching and every class that I teach. First is that students will apply what we're learning in class to their lives now, even though what we're learning are concepts that they'll probably deal with when they're working or in their internships or after they graduate and have a full-time job. And I really take this application seriously because it's what I learned when I was learning how to teach. My background in teaching is in teaching Spanish to native English speakers. I have a master's degree in Spanish, and so part of what we were learning was allowing students to experiment and play with using Spanish in the classroom or in their homework assignments, or even in readings or movies or TV shows that we were showing in class, so that students can see what does Spanish look like in real life. It doesn't look like what you might be just learning in your textbook, but also that you can master this. You may not be a native speaker, but you can learn Spanish and you can learn it well enough to actually use it with native English or native Spanish speakers to do what you want to get done in a social situation. And so I want my students to apply the concepts we're learning in class to their lives right now so that they can see that these concepts are really useful for them now and will be useful for them in the future when they're kind of building their careers. A really good example is just a couple of weeks ago in my class, we talked about motivation. And so our textbook goes through a lot of motivation theories. And students don't always understand why there's so many theories about motivation, but what we'll take is what are some techniques or strategies from each of those theories and how can you apply them now in classes or in your student organizations and that sort of thing. So we'll learn about how to break a big project into smaller tasks or how to write a SMART goal. And I have my students do that with something that's happening to them in their lives right now so they can see what that will look like in the future for their careers. My other kind of main goal in my teaching is to help students understand a lot of the issues around diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging within organizations, because students aren't always aware that they're happening, even right now while they're in the classroom or at the university, but I want them to be aware that there are other perspectives on a lot of the things that we talk about in class, and that these will matter for them when they're working, not only because they may be affected personally by that, but because a lot of my students are going to be the future leaders in organizations, and they'll have the ability to make changes in those organizations that can support all sorts of employees and leaders within those organizations to have a better experience in that organization as well as in their careers. So a really good example of how I kind of combine application and diversity is we'll have a discussion about student internships. A lot of my students have had an internship or will be having an internship, hopefully, before they graduate. And we'll talk about what does it mean when we have unpaid internships where students don't get paid for their time working in an organization. Who is that accessible to? What kinds of organizations have those kinds of internships, and how might that affect the careers of students who maybe can't afford to not be paid during an internship while they're in college? And I think by having those discussions, they can see how some of these diversity issues within workplaces around, for example, employee pay and how different employee pay might be at different levels of an organization can impact even students now when we're talking about some students getting paid for internships and other students not getting paid for those same internships. So I'm hoping when my students leave the class, they'll be a little bit more knowledgeable about all of these issues that we're talking about in class, but also when they see them in the workplace or in their own lives, they'll remember they learned something in my class and they'll think about what did we learn about how to actually manage that particular topic or concept, and how can I use that to help me meet my own goals and help other people have a better experience in their lives and at work. I'm Clarissa Steele and I teach at K-State.